Ayato is just a week away from being released in Genshin Impact. So you know what time it is? Well, it's Ayato pre-release analysis time. But of course, as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let's get started. To get started, Ayato is a main DPS, sub DPS, hyper carry, enabler. To be honest, it is not immediately obvious what Ayato is meant to do. Ayato kit is kind of confusing and is all over the place. It might take a while for Free Crafter after release to properly figure out what Ayato does. As a reminder, child, that took about a month to figure it out. So just as a quick warning, and I think this is going to be the biggest takeaway from this video, and that is, well, Ayato is going to take time to figure it out. At first, it looked like Ayato have really promising flexibility because Ayato Elemental Burst is fully deployable and it looked exactly like Ganyu's except in Hydro form. And you know what? A lot of the top tier meta team nowadays need a Hydro characters. Tazer team, Vaporize team, or Freeze team are all top tier meta archetype team that require you to have Hydro characters. So it looked like it's in a great spot for Ayato. Now, unfortunately, we do not know the ICD on Ayato's elemental skill and burst. Most importantly to note is that for Ayato elemental skills, he cannot use charge attack. He's limited to doing normal attack, as well as the fact that his elemental burst might have standard ICD similar to Ganyu, which means 1 every 3 hit. Combining these two, it means that Ayato might not actually apply that much Hydro, especially when we're comparing something to xiangling. So it means that the chances of Ayato being able to enable xiangling might not actually be that high, even if you combine both his elemental skill and his elemental burst. Not to mention his elemental skill only lasts for 6 seconds, which means the chances of Ayato working on xiangling is unfortunately not very high. Of course, we don't actually know if it worked or not. We'll have to do in-game testing to see how the ICD is. Maybe his elemental burst will have no ICD and then it'll work out, who knows. The reason why Chao can enable for xiangling is because his Riptide apply a lot of Hydro, which of course Ayato does not have. Not to mention that Chao can do charge attack, while Ayato actually cannot do charge attack at all. And if you recall, charge attack have a separate ICD than normal attack, which means that Chao just apply a lot more Hydro than Ayato would. So this is the reason why Ayato cannot be exactly compared to Chao, because the amount of Hydro they apply is most likely going to be really different, and it's hard for us to tell if Ayato is going to work for a Vaporize team. So let's leave that off the table for now, because I really don't think it will. But nevertheless, there is still electric charge team like Tasers as well as Freeze team that we can look into. Now, a lot of people might have high hopes for putting Ayato into Freeze team, and I'm here to kill your dream. Starting off, a lot of people have high hopes for Ayato because his elemental burst look exactly like Ganyu except in Hydro form. And back in the days, we used to talk about how Freeze team would be so good if Hydro Samacho was a playable character in Genshin. And while that is true, there is actually a couple problems with this approach. Starting off, a lot of people might look forward to the entire Ayato quadratic scaling thing because Ganyu elemental burst, when you pair her with Venti, have quadratic scaling, which has proven to be very strong in the past, especially in AoE environment. So people are thinking of, oh, I can do Ganyu, Venti plus Ayato for infinite quadratic scaling for infinite damage. And while that is true, the problem here is that if you are already running Ganyu and Venti, the chances of you doing enough damage with just Ganyu quadratic scaling is honestly enough. There's honestly not a lot of reason to put another quadratic scaling on top because you already have enough damage just from Ganyu's elemental burst alone. So even though it is true that Ayato could contribute to more damage with potentially another quadratic scaling, it is honestly not actually necessary when you already own Ganyu. But the bigger problem is actually energy. Ayato have a 80 cost elemental burst, while his elemental skill require him to take the field to actually generate energy, which is a huge problem. Not to mention that from the trailer footages, it looked like Ayato generate a very low amount of energy from his elemental skills. Well, not like you're gonna have time to use your elemental skills anyway. In the past, if you look at every single Freeze team, all the Hydro character is fully deployable and never ever spend a single second on the field. Mona cast EQ and leave. Kokomi cast E and leave. Yeah, Kokomi elemental burst require her to be on the field, and that's why we never uses it. The only use case for Kokomi elemental burst in Freeze team is to just refresh your elemental skill, because there's absolutely no time to put your Kokomi onto the field. If you carefully observe, Kokomi and Mona elemental skills are deployable, and the reason why this is a huge deal is because elemental skill is how you generate energy, specifically speaking, Hydro energy. When both Kokomi and Mona elemental skills are deployable, it means that both of those characters is able to generate Hydro energy while they're off field, and this is of course not the case for Ayato. With Ayato's 80 elemental cost burst and the fact that you cannot generate any Hydro energy off field, he's gonna have have a insane amount of energy issues. You thought running 200 energy recharge Mona was bad? Well, now welcome to like 300 energy recharge Ayato. That is if you could even get 300 energy recharge in the first place. And when you're building that much energy recharge, you're not going to be doing any damage. It doesn't matter if you have quadratic scaling damage when you do no damage in the first place because, well, all your stats went into energy recharge. So this is the big problem of putting Ayato into Freeze Team. It's just he doesn't really actually contribute anything. Carefully observe how both Mona and Kokomi can provide a good amount of utility. For Mona, that is the 60% damage increase on Omen, and for Kokomi, that is of course the healing that she can provide. Now, Ayato does have some utility, and that is 18% normal attack damage increase, I guess, which you don't use at all in Freeze Team when you're talking about stuff like Ayaka Elemental Burst, Ganyu Elemental Burst, Ayaka and Ganyu Charge Attack. You don't care about that utility at all, so he pretty much provide nothing. But with Mona and Kokomi being Kaiju Catalyst user, it means that they both can carry TTDS, which is 48% attack increase for your main crowd characters, and that's a lot. The good news for Ayato is that Freeze Team is not completely dead. There is still the concept of a on-field Hydro characters. In the past, we have experimented with Chao Freeze Team, which is using Chao together with off-field cryo characters such as Rosaria to provide freeze reaction, and to be honest, it was pretty strong. So potentially you can replicate something like that with Ayato as well. Now, it is really hard for me to say if Chao is gonna be better or if Ayato is gonna be better. After all, we don't know much about Ayato, and most importantly, we don't know how much damage Ayato can do compared to Chao. So let's leave it off there, but just know that there is potential. The biggest thing here is that, well, we keep talking about quadratic scaling on Freeze Team with Ayato. Guess what? Chao also have quadratic scaling through the mean of his Riptide. So it comes down to a battle of who has better damages, and well, we will have to wait for the damage calculation. For Tazer type team, while Ayato have really promising potential because he can attack really fast to proc C6 Fischl as well as Beidou Elemental Burst, using a Hydro character in a Tazer team is not entirely a new concept. When we first created Tazer team, there was Firework Chao, which used Chao in Ayato's places, and to be honest, it is pretty much the exact same team. And of course, later on when Kokomi got released, we also did Kokomi, and the most important one is of course Sucrose, which can proc Swirl on top to do a lot of damage, especially after the Elemental Mastery buff in 1.6. The question that you should be asking is not if Ayato work or not, because I'm sure he will work. The question to ask is how does Ayato stack up against other characters who can perform in the same role? And to be honest, this is the reoccurring theme over the entire video as well as the pre-release analysis. What Ayato does is not new at all and can easily be replaced with other characters. You want off-field Hydro application? Well, there is Kokomi and Mona. You want on-field Hydro application, or maybe just Hydro with a bunch of damage? Well, there is Xingjuice and Child. Not to mention, those two characters can use with xiangling, and it's hard to say at the current moment if Ayato can be used with xiangling. The thing that differs Ayato from other Hydro characters is the fact that he can kind of do both. Can he do both of those well at the same time? We don't really know. Maybe there will be a team where you run like Ayaka Ayato together and you just rotate between the two characters, kind of a brother and sister team. Of course, again, it comes down to actual gameplay testing, so there isn't really a way for me to tell at the current moment, especially that there might also be the Hydro carry Ayato team, where you do like Ayato and Xingjuice to solve his energy problem while doing a bunch of single target Hydro damage, kind of like a mono Hydro team. But again, that is not entirely a new concept. If you wanted a mono Hydro team, you could have always ran Xingjuice and Chao together. It is no guarantee that Ayato is gonna does it better. Over the video, you can see that the theme of this video is pretty much just Ayato is rather confusing. It is hard for us to tell until we get the gameplay testing on him, which is what I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why you need to wait about a week or two before we can get anything about Ayato. I think there is a pretty high chance that Ayato end up being a fairly balanced character where he is just gonna be flexible and to be easily slot into many of the team. It is really just that he's not needed because, well, many character already does what he does, and most importantly, Ayato does have some amount of gameplay issues, namely around energy problem. You might be thinking, wait, doesn't Ayato also have the Ascension 4 talent which kind of help with energy problem? The thing with his Ascension 4 talent is that just like Ayato himself, it also have identity crisis. You see, the Ascension 4 talent have not one but two conditions in order for you to trigger. You have to be lower than 40 energy, and the fact that you also have to be off field. I don't really know why they put two difficult to trigger condition instead of just putting in one when it's not even that good in the first place, but the fact that they put two conditions on it mean that that it is going to be very hard for you to utilize it properly. And it might help a little bit, but it's not going to help a lot. You might get like some amount of energy out of it. Just know that it's not going to solve its energy problem. Overall, I think I'm gonna put Ayato at a tentative rating of 2.5, which means he's a little bit short of coming in balance. I think overall, Ayato could have great potential, but he just have a small amount of gameplay issues. But most importantly, other Hydro character already does what he does, which means that he's not required for the meta at all. It pretty much comes down to actual in-game testing about how much damage he can actually do, what his ICD look like on his elemental burst, as well as on his normal attack, and if he can properly supply Hydro for xiangling, which completely changes our perspective on him. But for the time being, that is going to be it. Once again, I think the biggest takeaway from this video is to wait a week or even 2 before pulling on Ayato, because Ayato does have a lot of unknown about him. It's still really unclear of a lot of how Ayato actually works. So I think that is going to be the lesson here, not anything else about it. There's a pretty high chance Ayato is actually a great character because he can just do more than those other characters while being more flexible. There's a high chance that Ayato opened up entirely new team like Ayaka Ayato together like a brother-sister team. We don't know that. It will come down to actual gameplay testing and discovery. So of course, don't forget to subscribe for that because we will be doing those. But of course, as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.